back, and I have a very special guest to me. I have my big brother George Pegram, who is up here from Orlando, Florida, on a trip. He's playing in a bridge tournament in Memphis, Tennessee. He's a bridge player and travels. Oh, you've been all over the place playing bridge, ain't you, George?
We've played all over the country, yeah. You don't have to worry about your body, your knees and your ankles and your sprained ankles. You can still compete a little bit.
Yeah, it's not very physical, is it? But
No,
it is mental. But anyway, George came up for a weekend, and I asked him to come on with the show. George was born and raised in Ripley like I was, and he was athletically inclined. Graduated from Ripley, well, it was South Tippa High School, and
That's
he
right,
graduated
South Tippa County High School.
in 1964. And before we blast to the past, I guess me and George talk daily on the telephone and have for the last 30 years. And, of course, sports, we always there's always a sports conversation when we talk. We'll talk anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes a day. What is your opinion of how the March Madness is going this time before we go back to the past?
Well, I think several years ago when they start letting these players go to the pros early, it just kind of messed up that college football or college basketball. And what they got is parity. There's no question when your Lehighs and Creightons and Butlers and Gonzagas, Gonzaga was the first. It's a coin toss. I think if you play for matchsticks or gamble, you have to go on your better coaches at this time. The experienced coaches usually end up being the ones that get to the Final Four. With that being said, I guess Duke got there. He had handed to him by Lehigh. Yeah. So I was more interested in your conversation there on Peyton Manning.
Well, that's another thing I was going to ask you about. My opinion on that, and I've expressed it to you, but I'll express it again. I think you'd be crazy not to go with the San Francisco 49ers. What's your opinion?
Well, the best thing that happens to Peyton Manning is he's getting out of Indianapolis. But I can tell you this, if Peyton Manning had been quarterback of the Denver Broncos last year, they wouldn't have won half the games they won because they had no receivers.
Right.
You could look at the quarterback they had was putting the ball there and they were dropping it. And I can tell you this, he won't choose to go to Denver because of money. It'll be personnel issues. They're going to have to rehaul their receivers. He would not have won the games that Tim Tebow won last year because he couldn't do the things that Tebow did. And you take him and put him in Peyton Manning, I don't think they'd have won half the games they won. And Peyton Manning would have got himself hurt. But the good thing that's coming out of it is Peyton is getting the heck out of Indianapolis where he will have a chance to get himself protected. He wants that protection now. He's at that age that, well,
he's 35.
I thought he was older than that.
No, he's 35.
So I don't know where he's going to land, but the good news is he's getting out of Indianapolis and no feelings are going to be hurt. It's not going to be like that Favre departure. Everybody's going to be relatively happy. But I just think John Elway thinks he's some kind of football guru and genius and was anti-Tim Tebow. Of course, I lived in Florida and watched Tebow, and I said, my gosh, we watched him for 4 years. We've seen him play great. And who would think he wouldn't go in the first round? And then the naysayers all year they can't win. And every week he'd pass for 110 yards and win the ball game. And his boss is sitting over there shaking his head. So maybe that'll get Tebow in a better place where somebody will respect the fact that somebody plays with some heart. And maybe everything will all settle down for Peyton.
I don't think there's any question John Elway has shown absolutely no allegiance at all to Tim Tebow. I don't know why he drafted him, but it looks as if he's gone out of his way just to not back the fella.
That was a better question you asked there earlier in the day is why in the heck did they draft him if they don't want him?
Yeah.
Because he's made it clear they don't want him there. So
Tebow is one of the greatest college players I've ever seen play.
There's no question.
We've seen a lot. Gone through a lot of college players in our time. But anyway, I think you ought to go with the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of wisdom goes to the New York Jets. You made a comment earlier this afternoon. I don't know why anybody would want to go play for that coach. Well, you know, that coach is he creates problems with the media.
Controversy, yeah.
Yeah, with his mouth. And he puts his players under such pressure with his mouth. It's unnecessary pressure that's not there. So I don't know. But
And the bad thing with us right now, we got 5 more months till football comes on again. So
yes, and me and Bert,
waiting period.
Me and Bert hang on to any football story or conversation we could have. We love, we don't know. I'll be honest, I don't. Now you know a lot about You know a lot about basketball. I don't know anything about basketball. I'm a football fan, and I know a little golf, play a little baseball, very little, but me and Bert hang on to our football conversations as much as we can.
I don't blame you. That's the college ball game. College football is what I know and love.
College baseball has picked up. Ole Miss, as we've talked about, I think they had something like 7,000 or 8,000 fans there at each game this past weekend at Oxford. That's a happening that's kind of unfolded over the last 10 years.
Well, I don't know whether you're listening, I'm sure they've figured it out by now, but you bleed red and blue for Ole Miss. You can talk bleed any weekend for the last 10 years. Well, how the Ole Miss going to do? Well, you better watch them. They're going to be up for this game.
Yeah.
They're going to be up. All roads lead through Oxford. Do you bleed
red
and blue?
They did last year, and they just went right on by.
They did.
Oxford just went right on by to 55 miles an hour.
Sherman through Atlanta.
Ain't no doubt about that. You told me, and I was very interested in it. It was a story. I had great respect for. His name was Harry Carey Jr.
That's right.
And I got to know him back in the '80s. TBS, Turner Broadcasting System.
That's right.
Did the Atlanta Braves baseball games, and we were in one of these dull sessions without football, so I started watching the Braves baseball games and got to know and love Harry Carey announcing the Braves baseball. You told me an interesting story about that. I'd like for you to kind of, if you could, reconstruct that story. You had an experience that goes further beyond that.
There were 2 or 3. Actually, Harry Carey's daddy was one of the great sportscasters of all time.
The Cubbies.
I guess he was with the St. Louis Cardinals.
The Cubs.
Chicago Cubs.
Chicago Cubs.
But when I'd moved out to Boulder, Colorado, in my big step away from home back there in the late 60s, I went by the athletic department and said, let me be a spotter. That's what I do is spot. I spotted there at Ole Miss, and I did the Oxford High School football games, coached there at Oxford High School.
A spotter, let me interrupt. A spotter is somebody that sits up there, and you've got your announcers, and a spotter is somebody that's got the binoculars, and if number 20 makes the tackle, George calls that, and that's what a spotter is.
You have a board in front of you, and you're kind of telling the broadcaster, you're pointing out who did what. And so I was a spotter for Harry Carey. Very few people know that Harry Carey Sr. actually did Missouri football, and that's a little known trivia fact. Well, I moved to Tallahassee, Florida, and I had been spotting at Ole Miss and spotted out at Colorado. I said, well, let me tell you guys, the spotter is a great deal. You got a parking pass, you got a press box pass, and you got $20 to do the game. So Florida State had gone there. They were trying to rebuild their football image, and they hired for one season Harry Carey Jr. to do Florida State football. Well, that happened to be the season. I housed that team in a student housing property I was managing at the time. I housed that 0-11 team. It was a miserable experience, just a horrible thing. And anyway, Harry Carey Jr. was the spotter there. Now, he since had a son, Harry Carey III, that came down and went to Orlando and was the radio broadcaster for the Orlando Magic. I often wanted to go introduce myself to him. I never did, to say, hey, I work with your dad and your granddad. But there were quite a few stories with Harry Carey Jr. He was a movie star as far as he was concerned. He was a star, and everybody else was just kind of a plebe to him. And during one of the games, I got with the other guys on the radio. I said, this guy really thinks he's something. Let's just see how he can do it by himself. I'm going to get up and walk out of the press box. And I said, you guys follow me. So I got up and left. And about a minute later, the color man got up and left. Then the production guy
Left him there.
that produced the show, he got up and left. And we left Harry Carey Jr. on the radio by himself for a good 5 minutes. And he was squirming, because that's hard to do,
you know
is
it is.
carry yourself 5 minutes nonstop. Now, of
And
course,
make it
I can do it, and
entertaining.
you can do it, because we talk all the time. But he kept looking back, and he finally came on, and he, at the first break, he said, you know, you guys have taught me something. I have been too much of a big shot, and I'd like to take all y'all out to dinner tonight. And he took us all out for dinner, and he bought all the drinks, and we had a miserable time as far as the team, the 0-11. To make a sweet story ending, they later hired Bobby Bowden, who followed a guy named Daryl Mudra.
And I want you to tell about the Moodra and the Alabama game.
Well, there was Daryl Mudra came to Florida State.
After the 0-11.
After Larry Jones, and those Florida fans will remember the chicken wire thing. And Daryl Mudra had taken the smaller college. He had taken one of them to the national championships. And he was different. He would coach out of the press box. And I remember at the time making a comment, you don't be different in the South and lose. Well, they went out and they recruited, really they were the first of the big-time Southern teams that recruited in large scales minority athletes. And they brought some athletes into that town, my goodness gracious, at Florida State.
Yeah.
And son of a gun, if they don't go up to play in Alabama, and Alabama is ranked number 3 in the nation. Now that was back in the time when number 1, 2, and 3, they were the best 3 football teams in the nation. Now today, you don't know who's going to be up there, from Connecticut to South Florida to whoever happens to be undefeated at the time. But they had a great coaching staff at Florida State. Bill Parcells was on that Florida State coaching staff. He was offensive coordinator. And I was up there in the press box. Florida State was leading the game with 2 minutes to go, 7-3. And Alabama just couldn't move the ball. And they thought, my gosh, we've got this game won. And they had 4th and about 10 yards to go on their own 18-yard line. And there was a timeout call. Now, on the right was the offensive staff, and on the left of me was the defensive staff, and the defensive staff was just screaming. Clipboards were being thrown all over the place. And Florida State comes back. They get on the field, and they take the intentional safety. Now that makes the score 7-5 with less than a minute and a half to go. Well, the Florida State punter comes out, and he shanks the ball. And it goes off to his right, and Alabama kind of gets a field on it and gets it on the Florida State 35-yard line. Well, score 7-5, and the clock's now running. They try to run. Bama tries to run to the right, and they get stuffed. They try to run to the left, and they get stuffed. They try to run a draw play, and they get stuffed, and they got 4th and 10 with about 10 seconds to go in the game. And they drop back and they throw a pass to I thought he was a fullback, but he may have been a tight end lined up in the fullback position, to Ozzie Newsome. They picked up the first down, got it down to about the 23 or 4 yard line. They bring out their field goal team, hit the field goal, get off the field, winning the cotton picking game 8-7. Now what I maintained was, had Mudra won that ball game, which he should have, then he would have lasted at Florida State as long as he wanted to coach. What people don't realize, Bowden walked in there, I believe, from West Virginia, and he was loaded for bear with talent. They had more talent. Leroy Keys, they had Lee Nelson, you remember, he went to the St. Louis Cardinals, was a safety up there. I think they had 13 or 14 kids out of that group of players that Mudra recruited that ended up playing on Sundays. And Bowden, of course, the next year, he goes 6-5. He compressed a 9 or 10 win season down to 6-5, but he was a hero, because he had a winning season, his first winning season. But I was there in Tallahassee, and to be a part of that thing in 72 or 3 when they didn't win a game, and then in 1979, I remember having